Welcome to Engage, LSSSC's podcast where we share heartwarming stories of hope and explore topics that matter to our communities with the help of experts and thought leaders. I'm your host, Dr. Tiffany Mitchell, and I'm excited to bring you insightful conversations on a wide range of topics. So sit back, relax, and get ready to engage. Today, I am joined with Sequoia Thompson. She is with SoCal Grantmakers, and I'm so excited that today she's going to be speaking with us about the work she's doing there, as well as her role with diversity, equity, and inclusion within the SoCal communities. Welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Nervous and excited.
Don't be nervous. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey within the field of diversity, equity, inclusion, and how you got connected to SoCal Grantmakers.
Okay, Ashe. Thank you for that. So just a background of me personally as a human. I worked in transportation for quite a while, for about 11 years, Federal Express, Union Pacific Railroad, and LA Metro. And when I was at Metro, my mental health was really being challenged just because I just had a lot of questions about life and, curiosities that I just wanted to talk about. Mm-hmm. And one of the main questions were, why do we hurt and or harm each other? Like, why do we do that? Because we come out of the womb loving social human beings. So what happens in life to where we do these things to each other? We say these things to each other. We have these structures in place that help some and detrimentally harm others. Mm-hmm. I really wanted to know that. So I gave up transportation and I went back to school and I put all of my eggs in everything called higher academia. And I really, really enjoyed my time there because I'm glad actually I went back older because I was able to ask the questions from my lived experience, not asking the questions so I can get the degree, which I really appreciated. And so I started at Pasadena City College and I transferred to UCLA. I also worked at Pasadena City College and UCLA. And so as a student and an employee of higher education, I saw the same human disconnection, the same microaggressions, discrimination, and harmful ways that I learned in the books from these institutions. I saw them perpetuating the same things that I was learning. And so then I just kind of felt like I plateaued in higher academia. And luckily, a dear friend of mine sent me an application for this particular position. It was coordinator for something called Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation Los Angeles. And I'm going to read a little bit about it just because I want to honor the actual organization. Mm-hmm. And so TRHT is supported by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation and is a comprehensive national and community-based process to address and dismantle the historical and contemporary effects of systemic racism. TRHT aims to bring about transformational and sustainable change in both individuals and larger systems. The foundation identified 14 placed TRHT locations throughout the United States, and Southern California Grantmakers was selected to be the backbone of the organization to implement in Los Angeles County for a 4-year period beginning mid-2017. So when I got hired on, I was the coordinator for this particular program. And so all of that is, like it says, it's based around racial equity. And once the grant ended, then I was given another position at Southern California Grantmakers. But I really did appreciate my time there. And the framework consists of narrative change, racial healing, relationship building, and systems change, which will be implemented and evaluated by multiple sectors: business, philanthropy, community, nonprofits, and government. And so I want to continue the mission of TRHTLA by being a part of healing the hearts of those affected by systemic anti-Black racism, challenge the institutions who overtly and covertly perpetuate it, and continue to challenge myself so we don't perpetuate the systemic plate that separates us. So that's long story short. That's how I got to SCG.
Well, that's a lot. And one of the things I'm fascinated by, especially in your line of work, is especially when you look at the nonprofit sector, we see ourselves as disruptors. We're there to eradicate a lot of the injustices that are happening within our communities. But at the same time, sometimes we are part of the problem. Yes. And so as you do your work within the nonprofit sector, what things do you see that need to be disrupted within the systems of the nonprofit sector?
That's a really great question, and especially thinking about the nonprofit sector and philanthropy specifically, because I've only been in philanthropy for 3 years in this particular position. But what I think, I know this was one of the questions, what I think would be good to disrupt is kind of like really going into what, actually the second question, if it's okay, if I could just go to that one. It's a great segue of how we're moving. Like, it's a great segue of when we ask ourselves, like, what is DEI? When someone asks me that, my first response is always, well, what does DEI mean to you? And the reason why I ask that is because if you don't have an individual relationship or individual comprehension with it, you are now learning, just you're extracting, from a book or a podcast or, something. But if you're not synthesizing that information for your human, then you're kind of just perpetuating what the system already is. And it's really hard to change the system if you just keep going with it like that. So individual comprehension is really important. And so what is DEI for me? DEI is a life practice or a way of being that centers acknowledging and addressing the root of the issues to cultivate transformative and continuous solutions rather than checkbox fixes. Because we want to make things better, absolutely. But if we center our want and not center the reality of what we have to do to get there, then that is how we perpetuate some of the same harm that we are trying to dismantle. We really must look to understanding the root of the issue, why these issues are here. Why do we need a nonprofit sector? Why do we need grant makers? Why do we need these things to filter out money into the community? We have to answer that question. We have to get there. Why do we need this? Where did this money come from? We really have to answer those questions to really, if we really want to create sustainable and long-lasting change. So I think that would be the answer. I covered it.
Yeah, I think you did. And I think out of, what I'm taking away from what you're saying, and, a lot of people don't think about it. You want to implement DEI programs within your organization, and you want to talk about DEI. And sometimes I feel like it's becoming a buzzword.
Yes.
Where it just sounds right to talk about, oh yeah, we do DEI work and we do this. Well, what does that really look like? And to your point, how do you personally connect with it? What does that mean to you? Most people can't answer that, to your point. So if you can't do it at an individual level, how can you create systemic changes? And so the work that you're going to be doing, and I'm going to ask you about that next. Tell us some specific examples of how the work you're doing is transforming Southern California, and how are you doing that on a day-to-day basis? Like, what are the tools that you're using to really educate the communities that you're serving?
So I'm going to say, I don't know about the work that I do, changing Southern California. That's a huge feat.
Well,
but hopefully,
one step at a time.
Whoever is exposed to the workshops or talks that I do, I hope those individuals are changed, and then they keep that change reverberating to the collective. So I'll just say that. But I will give an example of, actually, I think it's really aligning because this is how I got here. So I got here from a grant makers forum for Orange County, I believe, at Los Angeles Valley College. And one of our members, who was Weingart, the Weingart Foundation, was one of the panelists. And so I hope it's okay that I'm quoting her. I mean, it was a panel, right? So I guess her words are open. But I won't say her name, but the person that was on this panel is one of our members in the Weingart Foundation. And she was really, really powerful in what she talked about, of how Weingart, one of our members, is specifically addressing racial equity within the organization. And I use this as an example because I have witnessed not just this person, but other individuals from Weingart actually showcase, the impact in the actionable steps that they're taking. And so I lead a program called Foundations of Racial Equity at SCG. Right now it is on pause, but I was able to meet people from Weingart in that particular program. And it's a 6-series program. We have things like grant making with the racial equity lens, racial capitalism, and just different things like that, so we can talk about, this is why, if you want to make changes, you have to understand these things first to be able to make changes. And so this person on the panel was really, really great. And what did she say? Okay, awesome. So I asked a question regarding racial equity, to your point, regarding racial equity in organizations living into their mission, vision, and values. How can an organization be intentional about creating a culture that invites individual comprehension to then get to a shared understanding? right? Because I kept hearing, when I got to S, I kept hearing this word, and it turned into a buzzword, shared understanding. So then they hire a consultant. We have a team retreat or something like that, so we can get to a shared understanding. But how can we have a shared understanding if each individual doesn't have their own understanding,
right?
Their own comprehension? It doesn't mean everyone has to be an expert or well versed in racial equity conversations, but at least you have to have a relationship with it. You have to have some. Whether you're with it, whether you're not with it, you have to know for yourself what it means. Because if you're just like, well, racial equity is, and you're just regurgitating the stuff on the website, that's not how change happens. That's how we stay stagnant. We do the same thing. So that individual comprehension is really important. And so she actually responded to my question as to why I think Ruby walked up to me or emailed me. And some of the examples she gave is that, the Weingart Foundation, like their funding is rooted in trust, and they trust the community or nonprofit knows what it needs. I'm going to return to that with the bullet point of dignity. I really do like that particular one. But I also wanted to share certain things that they share that Weingart is doing. They are on their truth and reconciliation journey. And what that means is they've incorporated like pay equity audits, staff wellness practices, intentional. And this one right here is so important because I think this one is something that we just don't even know how to do, as a sector sometimes. But be intentional about how we align ourselves with racial equity from the inside out, which means acknowledging, discussing, and unpacking where the Weingart wealth comes from. Where does it come from? Where does it come from? What is the history of why these people have this wealth that they want to give back to the community? Where did the wealth come from? Because if we don't assess or analyze that, it's just kind of like, yay, we have all this money, we're giving it away, we're good people. But where did the money even come from? So just being able to just have those conversations, and it's not about the shame, blame, or guilt, because that is not expansive, that is very restrictive, but it's about acknowledging the truth and what is. We have to acknowledge what is, what was, if we want to keep moving forward. And so directly to question, she also said Weingart might have a shared understanding of racial equity, but ... needs to have one as well. She needs to have one as well. Commitment is good. Commitment's great, but folks need to be able to talk about it. And for myself, as coordinator of equity, organizational culture, and dialogue, that dialogue piece is so important in DEI work. So important, because so many times we're just trying to fix the issue and we don't even know how to talk about the issue. And math don't math like that. Exactly. That's not how math works. So if you cannot discuss the issue, if you don't have any type of lexicon or relationship to DEI language or just a concept of DEI, being able to change something is going to be very difficult.
I agree.
So the dialogue piece.
It starts with being able to have those conversations. And when you're talking about having that dialogue, these are not easy conversations.
Yes.
And so you have to create a space where people feel safe enough to be vulnerable. Yes. Because that's the only way that you're really going to be able to start doing the real work and seeing the change within your organization. And then hopefully that gets perpetuated in the work that we do within the communities. So that we're actually living and breathing what we say we're doing.
Absolutely. We're actually on a journey at STG, and I will quote, and I hope it's okay, but we have someone coming in. Her name is London Jones, and she's helping us, work on our team agreements, like as an organization. And in one of the sessions, as we're working on our team agreements, what came up is physical safety and psychological safety. And psychological safety is really important. Because, and I'll just give like a very blanket example, if you are in a white vessel, living in a world that has catered to, your aesthetic, you being brave is different than a black vessel where the world has, come at us and, marginalized us and things like that. My psychological safety takes a little bit more effort to be brave in a white space, if that makes sense. And so just understanding, it's not just easy to say, you're safe here, you're okay here. If you don't understand how microaggressions impact people, if you don't understand that, then someone might say something with great intentions, but the impact might be detrimental to that human. But you're just saying, well, that was just their opinions. And you have no idea how it landed on this individual because that person didn't say a bad word or call them out their name. They just said, objective opinion, right? And so that's the difference between like safe space and brave space, and really contextualizing what we mean by that, and really centering psychological safety. And in order to really be able to cultivate that, you do have to understand the psychological effects of how white supremacy and systemic anti-Black racism have affected all of us, every single one of us, including white vessels.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Yeah.
Wow. Powerful work.
Ashe. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Don't go away, and if you've been inspired by anything that you've heard on today's podcast and would like to volunteer for Lutheran Social Services of Southern California, see our website, lsssc.org. Select Donate, Volunteer, and donate your time and talent to a cause you care about most.
Sequoia, earlier this year, I was reading an article by Forbes, and they were talking about DEI. And one of the things that they were highlighting was DEI fatigue, that in organizations that a lot of employees are becoming skeptical of DEI initiatives because they don't know what the outcomes are. So what are some key ways that organizations can put metrics to DEI initiatives so that they can actually show their employees and share with the community that the efforts that they're investing in are actually yielding some real results?
Ashe. This is a great question, and it absolutely comes up often. And so from my lens in this particular question, the urgency of measurement is creating a barrier. And I think that is influencing and informing that burnout. What did you say? DEI? Fatigue, yes. Because you're always constantly having to prove something. Mm-hmm. You're always constantly having to prove something. And, forms and attendance and different matrices to measure impact, they're important. But the thing is, we center the paper and the numbers, and we forget to humanize the data. The data is important, but we forget that, guess what? The data came from humans. That's how you got the data. That's where it comes from. And so, yes, the data is really good, but the urgency and the demand to measure, to prove that it's working, that is a very white dominant narrative of we have to prove that we're right. It's not founded in trust. It is not founded in trusting the values that we say. Because if we say we believe in DEI, if we truly believe in it, then we have to trust ourselves. We have to trust ourselves as organizations, as individuals, because to someone's point earlier, it takes a long time to create sustainable change. We are trying to change centuries of systemic inequalities. There is not one form, not one matrices that is going to give an org the data they need to create change next year. That's not how DEI works. That's not how math works. And so when we come to DEI, I think a lot of the fatigue is because a lot of impact of DEI is the qualitative impact. But in a meritocracy, whichever one that is, we live in the fallacy of meritocracy. We have to prove everything. It has to be on paper. The one of the white dominant narratives, worship of the written word. If it ain't on paper, then it didn't exist. Someone could literally say, I was changed. My life was changed, by this event. You know what? I went to this particular program and I have now started racial equity at my organization. If that's not in a form, it's like the impact didn't happen. And that centering of the data, that's the issue. It's not saying throw away the data, but you have to humanize the data. And be able to do that, you have to trust. You have to be able to trust. Actually, one of our members from Weingart says something to the effect of, instead of saying smaller nonprofits, saying less resource, because some of the smaller nonprofits have the biggest impact because they are often on the ground doing the work that we are funding. So you might have a larger nonprofit, right, that can do the matrices, that can do the 10-page reports and everything like that because they have grant writing resources. But then you have a smaller nonprofit that's actually in the community that's creating change. But because they don't have, like a sophisticated grant writing process or something like that, it doesn't seem like they're doing anything. And so they're like a smaller nonprofit. But that is counterintuitive to change. For us to be able to create change, you must center the most marginalized because they are at the front lines. They know what they need to create change. So centering them and trusting that they know what they need. Oh, this person also said funding rooted in trust. Trust that the community or nonprofit knows what it needs. And so when it comes to matrices and stuff, I think there's a collective discomfort in people's bodies of like, no, I've been working in corporate America or philanthropy and nonprofit, and yeah, we have to do reporting. Yes, we have to do data. And then it's like, there's no other thought process. Yes, those things are good, but also, storytelling, narrative change, centering the voice of the communities that we're serving and not the statistics that we've read. Both are needed. Statistics are good so we can have measurements to know how to move forward, but we have to have that trust and not depending on the statistics to define impact. We have to trust that if we are saying our mission and values, if we are leading into this, that we have to trust that it's going to work or that it's at least going to make an impact and not fall back on, it worked because this paper said it worked. In order to see the change in behavior or the change in policy, that takes time. And so that type of patience and that type of trust in DEI work, I think sometimes gets looked over, and that's where the fatigue comes in. For me personally, doing racial equity work like our Racial Equity Action Institute, Foundations of Racial Equity, and hearing like, I can't talk about this at work. This is amazing. I now have language to, tell our board, this policy is actually harmful. Can we change this? Like those conversations. But it's like, if I don't write that down and put it into a form, it's like that program didn't have impact, but it did. It did, and so it has to be a balance of qualitative matrices and also quantitative matrices. Both are required for DEI work. So
that makes complete sense. I mean, and honestly, if we think about the work that I'm thinking about, the work that we do here at LSS and just even other places that I've been, it's not one or the other. It's both to tell a story, right? So you're saying qualitative and quantitative. We talk a lot about outcomes and outputs.
Yes.
Right? It's not about how many people showed up at your door today, but what was the change of the people that showed up at your door. And a lot of times you're planting seeds. And so to your point, you start to see things over time, but it does take patience to watch things mature and to grow. So I know internally, like if I look at the staffing here at Lutheran Social Services, a lot of things that we look at change over time.
Yes.
And so we look at what are our retention rates? Are we retaining more of an employees than we were 3 years ago? And if so, why? Yeah. What has changed today versus 3 years ago? And like you just start to see the indicators pop up on its own without necessarily having to force a metric in place. It just kind of evolves. So I'm glad to hear you say that.
I really appreciate you saying that. The indicators show up by themselves. I did a program at our organization. It's called Accountability Care, and it was just internal, so we can kind of have an internal discourse in language to talk about racial equity. And at the end of the program, a colleague asked, how can I honor you, with all the work that you did, this labor of love, and all of this? And I said, I'm just the messenger. The knowledge is the knowledge. I don't own the knowledge. So if you want to honor the message, take the message, integrate it into yourself, make it your own and understand it, and then pass it on. And then we see the change by default. The indicators will show themselves by default. But we don't have to force the matrices. That trust, like you said, the indicators will show themselves because math is math no matter how we use it. Math over here, like, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. Y'all going to use me correctly or not, but math is still going to be math. And so what you're saying, the indicators will show themselves, that right there, but that takes trust. And a lot of nonprofit and what I see in the nonprofit sector and the philanthropic sectors is that trust is not there. And not even like trust, I trust you're a good person. Not that type of trust. Just trust that this is what we're doing, we believe in it, and things are going to change. Just because we don't understand the change, just because we don't see the change immediately, doesn't mean it's not happening. So we have to trust those moments when members say, oh, that was so transformative. When members say, I never have been able to talk about racial equity at my job. We have to trust those moments because those are the seeds. Those are the seeds that are going to help the data, that are going to support the quantitative. Those qualitative seeds support the quantitative. Ooh, that was a full circle. But yes, I really like how you put that. I really like how you put that. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Up next, some final thoughts. And to discover all the many ways you can donate your treasure to Lutheran Social Services to help vulnerable people of Southern California, go to lsssc.org and select Donate.
Sequoia, it's been a pleasure having you join me today and talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So before we wrap things up, please share with us what's on the horizon for yourself at Southern California Grantmakers.
Ashe. So one of the things that SCG is going, and my particular direct report, Cameron Green, shout out, she's amazing. She's also my mentor. We have our REPL, which is Racial Equity Peer Learning Exchange. And just to give like a small synopsis, by convening representatives of foundations to exchange ideas, lessons, policies, and practices on racial equity and various aspects of diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, provides an opportunity for member foundations to improve their own approaches through peer learning. Right. You know, like I said earlier, the member from Weingart was saying it's good that Weingart has a definition, but I have to have a definition myself. And being able to do that with your peers in the sector is really, really important. You know, like podcasts and articles are really good, but having that one-on-one dialogue with your peers is really, really impactful to integrate the knowledge of DEI. And we also have our annual conference coming up, and it's called Reimagine Our Economy. And it's Tuesday, September 12th, 9 to 5. So if you're interested, sequoia@socalgrantmakers.org. Please go ahead and email me, and we'll see if we can get you in there. If you're interested in becoming a member at SCG, let me know. I can get you connected to the correct person. And before I pass the mic back, I do want to kind of contextualize, leave a little bit of context about DEI, because I really appreciated, the question, what is DEI? You know, and I answered that it's a life practice. It's a way of being. And also, why equity? And so when we talk about equity, fairness and equality requires context, right? It requires context. And I think equity is that context. To give everyone the exact same thing is unfair when everyone has not been exposed to the same resources, or at bare minimum, the same respect and dignity. So at that point, that is why equity is so important, because to say we need to be fair, we need to be, give everybody equal chances. Equity is saying we need to give people what they need.
Yep.
Yes. Ashe, finishing the sentence. Yes, we need to give people what they need. And then we will get to the outcome we're trying to achieve. Right? And then why inclusion? And really talking about inclusion to contextualize is who is not at the table? Why are these people not at the table? And let's address that. Rather than saying, okay, well, let's put those people at the table. Okay, we're done. We have them at the table now. We're all good. Without taking into account the impact of historically being left out, tokenization is unfair and can be extremely harmful. Just putting people at the table that aren't there is not enough. It is not enough, and it actually can be extremely harmful. It's not enough to just include those who have been historically left out. The acknowledgement of why they have been left out and addressing that is crucial to authentic inclusion. And so I just want to leave those two there when it talks about, I really like to contextualize equity and inclusion, to move away from their buzzwords that we have to do. No, they're things that we must move in the world as, and this is how we can do it authentically. But yeah, so I will just leave it there. Thank you so much, LSS, Lutheran Social Services, for having me. This is like my first podcast, so
you did great.
Thank you, especially regarding like racial equity. So I'm really honored. And also Ruby, who is a grant writer here, thank you for the email. Thank you, girl. Thank you for the email. I wasn't able to, actually converse with you at the event we were at, but I'm really, really glad that you reached out and I have this opportunity. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
We hope you are enjoying listening to this broadcast, and Lutheran Social Services of Southern California wants to invite you to accept a top secret assignment to join us this year at LSSC's Color of Hope Gala and Awards. We are calling it Mission Possible. You'll enjoy dining, live and silent auctions, a champagne reception, entertainment, and more, all at the beautiful, historic, and mysterious Mission Inn on Saturday, October 7th. You'll be up close and personal with other top agents for change in Southern California who are being honored. All proceeds from the event go towards building a community wellness campus at our current large-scale site in San Bernardino, the Central City Lutheran Mission. You'll get first-hand information on how this amazing and transformative place can be accessed by the entire community and will also serve as a short-term residence with services for up to 140 of our friends and neighbors who are experiencing homelessness. This recording won't self-destruct, but your opportunity to complete your mission will end soon. For more information and early bird ticket prices, see www.lsssc.org. Sponsors of this one-of-a-kind event to date include Kingsbridge Technologies, Thrivent Financial Services, Surf City, Concordia University, Enterprise Fleet Management, TR Design, and Tovey Schultz Construction.
Thank you for tuning in to Engage. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please subscribe to the podcast and leave a review on your favorite platform. And don't forget to follow us on your favorite social media site and keep up to date with all the ways LSSSC embraces, equips, and empowers Southern Californians in your community. Until next time, thank you.